Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Dreamers Lab podcast. So today I'm very happy to catch up actually with Rupert. So we met last time in Lisbon for AR VR event. We also enjoyed the good weather in Lisbon and the good crowd. People are entrepreneurs, investors, dreamers. There were some interesting pitches I remember also about the combination of AI and VR and creator economy, of course. So we had a great chat around, very futuristic topics. So today we are going to even talk about it more. So Rupert, can you maybe introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Thank you very much for the warm introduction, Ings. Yes, I've been with Google for the last 15 years. Just set out onto my own path, but I would say the most exciting part of my time there was getting quite heavily involved in virtual reality specifically, and I built Google's first dedicated VR space about 6 or 7 years ago. Once in a while, I remember how long it's been. And on the one hand, it's exciting that we have a mature VR industry. On the other hand, it's a bit frustrating that it's taken this long to hit the wider mass adoption. But I think what I've enjoyed about it, my career to date, is it's been a chance to marry technology to incredible creative people. And that's what I'm intending to do for the future as well.
Amazing. Yeah. So I still remember in 2016, I was in a VR and computer graphics conference, and I got introduced to the very new back then Google Cardboard and Google Daydream. I've been trying out in 2016 some very fun stories. I remember there is a very heartwarming story, a girl walking in the rain. We even got some merch, like some sunglasses, just because we've tried to experience in the event. So, but then afterwards, I think Google maybe calmed down a little bit in the development side of Daydream and Cardboard. It was kind of only during 2 years. So maybe in a larger sense, could you tell us a little bit more about your journey throughout the hardware side and the content side and creativity side of all the VR, AR, XR headsets since you've been working on it and
Oh my goodness, sure.
exploring it for quite some time?
Sure. So that actually turns the clock back quite far because, believe it or not, I tried my first VR headset, I'm gonna say 28 years ago in London in an arcade that's no longer there called the Trocadero, but some Londoners may remember. Um, I played something. I want to say it was called Pterodactyl Nightmare, but basically you're on a giant chessboard with a very heavy headset on your head and a little round plastic ring to stop you keeling over. And I think it was geared for kids. The ring was quite low, so you had the sense of, I would say, vulnerability, which probably added to the experience. And it was run at 10 frames per second on an Atari ST at the time, I believe. So it was massively underwhelming and quite expensive for a 2-minute experience. You basically had to shoot these flying green pterodactyls, and it was a taste of what was to come. And it just launched that story in my head, which was, okay, 5 years from now, this is going to be great. And then the frustration, of course, was every 5 years, it was still 5 years away. And I couldn't wait for it to happen fast enough, but I forgot about it a little bit. And then I was slightly involved. I live in Switzerland now, and I got a bit involved in the indie game scene. I have a friend developing some content for these headsets, and she had the DK1, which was one of the original Oculus development kit. And then I got to try that, and it moved on finally in leaps and bounds. It was something that felt like it really was on the cusp. Low resolution, I think there was enough lag there for it to feel frustrating. I knew it wasn't there yet, but it was closer than it had ever been. And then, by the time, I think the next big headset I tried, I just dived straight into the Vive, from HTC and Valve, and it blew me away. Again, that was a friend gave me the demonstration. Absolutely phenomenal. I suppose just a little ahead of that, I was playing cardboard, and that was a fun one. It was surprisingly good for a silly little bit of cardboard and a rubber band to stop your phone slipping around. I just come back from my holidays, and I'd taken a beautiful 360 photograph on a beach, and it was still on my camera. And the clever thing they did about the cardboard experience that you launched was it could access any potential VR content you had. And one of these was this 360 image from a week ago, and it felt like being there again. And it wasn't even in stereo. It was this flat experience, but the idea that you could move your head around as if you were there. No sound, anything like that. That would all come later, of course. But I loved it, and it made me realize that okay, this is the age of VR we've been waiting for. And I've had many headsets since then. I've played on I think the next big one was AWE, an earlier AWE in goodness, I want to say Munich in 2019. I tried the Vario headset for the first time, which is famous for being the Retina display, or as a smaller Retina display inset into the main LED panels. And that again was like having the scales taken from your eyes, because you got a glimpse of a world that felt was in such fidelity. It had a reality to it like I hadn't experienced anything before. And I've tried all of I've got a Quest and Quest 2 sitting in the head seat and the Go, all of this stuff. So I've loved the journey. It's been exciting to see the technology progress. I think we're still some way before the wide adoption. I know a lot of these headsets have been sold, but they're not actively used, not on a daily basis. And I think we still need to have them become lighter and more useful for that to be. But it's a journey I'm excited to continue alongside the headset manufacturers. That's a long
Amazing.
answer.
Definitely. So, as you mentioned, throughout your journey, you've been trying different devices, hardware. Of course, due to different technical limitations, there were and there are still a lot of limitation as of today. However, from storyteller point of view, from a platform, let's say, point of view, a lot of great creative people are making content suitable for the existing hardware still, right? And uh, in the end, beforehand, we were doing storytelling on text-based like book. Um, and afterwards, when we have internet, when we have connection, we changed, shift into multimedia, etc. But then people's imagination, I guess, are the ones that we are trying to stimulate through
Yeah.
those different types of content. So maybe it's a very vague and large question. Feel free to just share whatever you have in mind. But then, what do you think are the creative ways that you've been witnessing during those years of people trying to create something new, even under the current technical limits?
Sure, that is a good question. I would say, like any storytellers moving to a new medium, the grammar isn't quite there yet. So we haven't learned how to use it. It's, for example, I think when filmmaking, regular celluloid film came along, people didn't always know that if somebody exited stage right, they should enter stage left in the next scene. And just little things like this continuity of movement and the sense of space and place. And I see that a little bit with VR. I guess the famous bugbear, of course, is movement. If you have a scene that you're watching and you're in a moving camera, or even worse, you're in a camera that changes movement. I'll maybe start with some bad examples before I give you some good examples. I'm not a huge fan of 360 video on VR headsets, or to be honest, desktop playback. I feel like there's the fear of missing out. There's something going on behind you. Generally, if it's a moving camera, and one of the worst experiences I had actually was somebody took a camera on a boat. So not only was the boat rocking back and forth, it was turning, it was pivoting as it drove out a harbor, and I managed about 1 minute. I just felt so seasick. And so I didn't have an exciting maritime adventure. I just had a seasick simulator. Absolutely not what I signed up for. And I would say a complete misuse of the technology. And so either you have to be moving in a fixed line, that's, I would say, good grammar for how stories can be told, or you can do clever things. I remember there was an early one, this is going back a long while ago, but I think Michelle Obama had, uh, may have been Wired. It was one of the, I believe, it could have been the Wall Street Journal or something, but they'd created this VR experience where it was a tour of the White House, and there was a static camera. And when you were taken to a new location, there was a lot of on-screen annotation. So you would always know exactly where the attention span. The idea of a director of photography would set up your cameras in a way that would draw your attention on something, and even pull the focus to really have the main subject to be like in frame and right there in front of you. And so you have to kind of create new ways of doing that on these new media as well. Some of the ones that have done it right, I like the ones that aren't so much just a static playback, but where you have to interact with an environment and you almost extract the story yourself. So I'd say towards that, there were experiences like The Blue was one of my favorite ones. BLU, it was called, and it was, I guess you could say, a scuba diving simulator. And there was 3 small scenarios, each about 5 minutes each. And probably the most affecting one was you on the bottom of the sea on a wreck on a reef, and you're looking around and you have a few moments to just find your feet, as it were, and then this beautiful great blue whale swims into view, and you have this moment of interaction that feels very sacred. Now that's a played back experience, but it was a beautiful setting. It took you somewhere that most people won't get to experience in real life, and then it had an interaction with wildlife that felt meaningful and impactful, and it was a beautiful experience. Um, I would say the other storytelling experiences back then that really stood out from the crowd because I felt they did something right was there was a fun one from Jon Favreau, who you may know from well, the first Iron Man movies, but he's done a few indie things as well. But he's a great writer and director, and he created something called, let me get this right, it was Gnomes and Goblins, and it takes place in this beautiful little berry forest of trees with little doors and windows, and a whole city comes to life. And it's a beautiful little city. Kids love it. It's just adorable. And you can look in these windows or open the panels, and it's like a living doll's house, really. And there's a few things you need to do. You need to pick some fruit and some nuts and drop them down various uh, openings into these little. There's a I think you start on the gnome. No, it's a goblin level, and they have a distillery. You drop some peaches into the distillery. It's this fun little side game, and so you come to the end of the experience, but it's at your own pace, and you learn how this world works just by walking around it and peering, which I think is a really nice mechanism of discovery. A couple more, I'd say that the Star Wars one, the early ones, Trials on Tatooine was absolutely phenomenal. It did a great job of guiding your sight and narrating you through. And because it's an interactive experience, there's a Millennium Falcon lands, and you have an interaction with R2D2, and you have to do a couple of things. Very small adventure. Because it's interactive, I assume they were monitoring the active users and where people get stuck. And so over time, they had some changes to the narrative. There's a voiceover. You have a headset, and Han Solo tells you to do some things, and the buttons got better, the instructions got better, and so you had this smooth, seamless thing. Because when I was running the VR lab at Google, I was giving these demos multiple times per day for months on end, and I could see very clearly where people struggled with the experience. And then instead of coming out having entered a magical world, they come out having spent time in a frustrating one and a little bit annoyed of the software and at themselves. And it's not the experience you wanted to give people. And I'd say the last one that was of particular note, and again, it's just these were my formative years in VR, really. This is 7 years ago now, so they stand out for me. There was something called, I want to say, La Peri, which was a French production in collaboration with a ballet company. And it is, I forget the name of the composer, but it's a story of, actually, I'm not sure how close the VR experience sticks to the original ballet, but they did some beautiful motion capture of a dancer, like the principal dancer, in the role of, I think it's a fish to begin with. It's these animal spirits, and then later this, I think it's a monkey or something, and it moves up to this human-like character. But you have this transition through all of these various animated anima, these spirit animals that are just beautiful, and you're in the middle of this as it plays around you. But there's a lot of things like zombie shooters, and so it's just quite striking to see this very ethereal, almost spiritual connection to animal spirits that you would have in something with a beautiful music as well. And the whole experience started, was framed by you on stage in this great ballet stage, and then it slowly became more uh, like realistic in this other world. And so I love that experience too. So those are the ones that stand out for me, and I think they just married an understanding of the limitations of the headset and the experience and how people can feel. It minimized the nausea and just immersed people into interactive worlds that you just cannot explore in any other media. So absolutely the best of my VR formative experiences.
Thanks for sharing all those great examples. Many of them I haven't tried at all, but I do remember the ballet one. Being able to observe the dancer just close by instead of while you sitting in an opera, just trying to open your eyes to stare on the stage. Those are two totally different experience, and actually it allows also the democratization of access. People who are not in Paris, not able to go to opera, actually have the chance of admiring the great art that is the ballet dance, right? So that is
Exactly.
one use cases
Absolutely.
that I really loved.
Yeah.
So basically, when we are reviewing, let's say, those favorite experiences, the creative experiences you had, I was also thinking about, the business behind, because in the beginning, let's say there are some big IPs, they utilize the IP to produce some artistical works, and there are also public money. Let's say in France, here is like public television or CNC, the National Cinema Council. So they are providing the source and the funds for production. So it's like very artistical, location based experiences. But as you mentioned, now there are more and more people buying headset. I guess the subscription model and also pay per use model, pay per product model is changing how creatives or companies are designing their products, right? Like it needs to be having a high retention rate, so people need to be coming back for more and more and more. So it's more like game like, with kind of addictive mechanism always. So maybe from that point of view, my question, or if I can throw out some thoughts, and then happy to hear your thoughts as well, is what actually makes sense, like under the technology limitation plus the monetization requirements, and also maybe the entrepreneurs and, let's say, the platforms, what actually will make sense for them to create? Is it to give more and more fun, more colors, more photorealistic setups, more experiences virtually, or uh, differently?
Sure. That's a tough one because a lot of people were trying to figure out the financial side. I certainly had the luxury of working for a deep-pocketed corporation. So I'm sure you're familiar with Google Earth VR, which was an amazing experience. Won a lot of awards. We did all the early testing for that in the VR lab. That was free, of course, and it was, I think, a statement of intent from Google about where we're going with maps, and just what we can do with that technology. So for those that haven't experienced it, it's like stepping through the monitor window into Google Earth on your screen, and it had this incredible dynamic where you could just fly around. And we came out fairly early with that. I thought it was an amazing experience, quite so early in the development of these platforms. And like any product managers, we'd assess the 7-day active users, and there weren't many people using it, which was really, really kind of sad, given what a remarkable experience it was. And so there was 2 versions came out. We had an update a few months after the first launch, where we had Street View imagery was combined, which actually was a great way of introducing new content. But we weren't financially constrained so much as headcount. And so what happened was the team was disbanded. And I think this was the pain felt by a lot of other people around the same time. I had friends developing a variety of smaller VR experiences, and none of them were making money. They were using them primarily as an opportunity to get their agencies out there. They were coming from game development backgrounds, and these experiences were seen as a way of, well, 2 things. It was a loss leader, generate some interest in the company, show that they had an expertise in this area. And when people were going to come calling for all these VR experiences with more commercial aims, they were going to be ready, and they would have this in their show reel. And it just didn't really happen. So I think some of that slack for VR content was taken up by the broadcasters. And like one I used to work for sometime after, of course, was the BBC, who I think for years have had a public purse that helps them explore some of this emerging technology. And they're big on podcasts, of course, and they were one of the early streaming platforms. I think 16 years ago they launched iPlayer, which was way ahead of a lot of the what we see the incumbents today, the Amazons and the Netflixes for actual online streaming. They had a VR team, and they did some quite nice stuff. I judged one for one of the broadcast awards a while back at the BBC, a Doctor Who experience in the TARDIS, where there's like a mini adventure, and it's the same thing. It's one of these 5-minute, effectively canned animations with various stops for you to pull levers and things, but it was nicely done. I think they had some great wildlife photography and some experiences too. But they disbanded that team also, which is kind of tragic. So I think it's moved more from the filmmaking, and you had people like Within, Chris Milk, and I've seen a gradual shift more towards less, I would say, passively observed content to game-related things. Now, obviously, gamers have got a certain appetite for spending time in these worlds. But even the experiences that would have been more, I would say, passive originally, that what seems to have arisen is one of the big money spinners, oddly enough, is meditation experiences. And oh goodness, I think it's Supernatural, I think is Chris Milk's one. He used to do a lot of great, I would say, journalistic content. I think he worked with some journalists on, I want to say, Shadows of Isidra, which is about the Syrian refugees. I want to get that right, because it might not be, he wasn't the main journalist, but he's done a succession of great video-based experiences, and he had a platform called Within for 360 content that you would subscribe to. But it was this fitness app that wound up making the money, and they've pivoted the entire company towards. There's great meditation apps out there. And then the Andrew Pan gorilla, of course, is Beat Saber on the Quest, which is playing with these virtual swords where you chop these colored blocks as they come at you in time to music. And they did something absolutely phenomenal, which was they just took a cold hard look at the economy of this. One of my favorite experiences on the original Vive was something called Audio Shield, which was, to all intents and purposes, the same game, but with a developer of one. You had colored shields in your hands, and there was colored blobs coming towards you in time to the music, and you would knock the blobs away. And it had one very smart thing which probably killed them, which was an integration with YouTube. So any YouTube videos that you liked with music, you could have them uploaded. It would take a couple of minutes to process the track, but once you did it, it was shared with the rest of the game playing community. And so you could have any piece of music that you wanted, and you could play to this, which did two things. It made the content free effectively, and it gave them a huge amount of dependency on the YouTube API, which I think was taken away at some point. And so this thing just gradually fell into misuse because it wasn't maintained. Beat Saber just went, okay, you get 20 songs, 30 songs in the basic pack, and then every 10 songs that comes after, you have to spend 50, like 15, $20 or whatever it is. And so they created a platform for music consumption to the point where I think when new albums came out, they were launching simultaneously on Beat Saber as a platform. Now they were bought, I could be rusty on this, a few years ago, they were bought by Oculus Game Studios for 30 million, something like that. And it accounted for some absurd, like 50% of Oculus sales at some point, because it was the must-have title. It was the first thing people bought. It was fun to do. So it was, you could have fun with your parents or the rest of your family in the living room playing this slightly silly looking game. And then you could follow along on your phone if need be. And then the fact that they had people tied to this platform and were constantly being advertised to in game, and then as a treat, every couple of months they'd plonk another $10 down for a new album. So I thought that was pure genius. So I'd say the monetized content appears to be game related. Definitely heavy on the dopamine, and when you're in a late night playing session and then your favorite artist pops up on the content page, you're much more inclined to buy it. So I think a lot of these VR experiences have gamified. And I love games, I love VR, so it's a pretty smart match. But the people who have got, I would say, good marketing skills as well as the good creative skills are the ones that tend to do well on these platforms, as they always have on any platform. So no change here.
Yeah, a lot of content creators, game creators, they are trying to crack the code like Beat Saber, the viral gameplay, the mechanism, the social sharing side of things. It was quite a legend in the industry. Um, the very interesting example you mentioned, the dependence of YouTube API, made me think about the current state of art as well. A lot of startups, they are building their business model on top of some third party external AI platform as well, correct? So that got me quite worried. Also, the same case as you mentioned. So I saw that you were looking into a lot of innovations, creative side of generative AI as well. So maybe before jumping into that specific pain point or problematic, maybe if you would like to share some of your observations in general and maybe some of the challenges as well.
Sure. So the generative AI thing was super exciting for me. I'd been playing with Lambda for quite a while at Google. We had internal access to early builds of these things that were updated fairly frequently. Now, I did not fall in love with my chatbot like Dennis Lemoyne, but you could see it was on its way. One of my favorite movies of the last few years was Her by Spike Jonze, where famously the main character does fall in love with his virtual assistant in a way that felt weirdly believable. I mean, he was quite a socially isolated guy, but here you have this virtual being that can, I would say, cater to every whim and be never be moody and be nice to you at all times. So I can see the appeal. But that was my experience of generative AI specifically, right up until about, I want to say, I think it was the end of August, when I was watching a lot of architects start to play with this tool that now has become synonymous with the form Midjourney. Tremendously exciting, just seeing these incredible, beautiful images of the sort of concept sketches you would see architects come out. Now, they were rough around the edges. You could tell that they were a work in progress. But what happened very quickly was the version number of Midjourney clicked up really quick, fast. Now, I'd seen DALL-E beforehand. I think I'd even played with a public version, but it was so rough and rudimentary, and the output was so far from what you had in your head that I didn't spend much time there. But with Midjourney, once you get over the hump of the awkward Discord installation and some of the grammar that you have to deal with, it made the images in your head come alive, and it did it in far greater fidelity and then far better. art than I think I could ever have achieved with any, pen, pencil, painting, digital skills, Photoshop, and it was phenomenal just to see this. And so it became this incredible feedback loop, dopamine hits. I was staying up quite late at night doing this on a daily basis. I'd say I was one of the early subscribers. I just got hooked on it. Somebody had described it as, talking about dreamers, a dream printer. This idea that you could have a picture in your head, and the frustration of any artist, I think, is communicating that to somebody else in a way that they get it. Now, the frustration, of course, with Midjourney is you can have quite far from your prompt. It doesn't always get what you're trying to convey, but it still looks pretty. It does a good job of nicely lighting and composing shots so they look very beautiful. Sometimes to their detriment, if you want to add a bit of an edge or ugliness to these things that makes them a little more realistic or authentic or just generally thought-provoking. You have to work quite hard to stop them being, I would say, just pretty images. But it was an amazing journey for me, and I've become so entranced by it. You probably see from my little label there, I've started a consultancy company for AI specifically to help retailers, marketers, and ultimately the film industry to adapt some of these tools, because I think it will disrupt many industries. Both the text version, which you're going to start seeing is available to people as well, conversational bots right now, but I think that interface is going to shift more into live audio, particularly with this plethora of headsets that have a microphone in them. So pretty much anybody listening to music walking down the street has a microphone that they can communicate with their phone. And when you have a useful personal assistant on your phone, and I fully expect to see Apple come out with this in the next year or so, where you have something on device that knows you well and doesn't even need an internet connection. That's the power of these large language models. They're getting smaller and more focused. As some of them push larger, some of the more useful ones, some of the ones for specific domain expertise get smaller. And so if you're a doctor attempting to have a conversation with a potential patient, some of the early stuff or some of the stuff that you could do with a nurse or whatever, you can replicate in these expert systems. And these are the systems that will save lives. But also the video side is super exciting one for me, and also the move from text to image, but image to video or text to video. And probably anybody that's been watching Instagram or LinkedIn or indeed TikTok increasingly are going to see some of these haunting images that are coming out of these Runway and Pika Labs doing terrific video work too, which I have no doubt will absolutely revolutionize who and how films are made.
Indeed. So, well, if we combine the two general topics we mentioned, the mixed reality, virtual reality, and the generative AI side, I guess it's still work in progress. A lot of different startups are filling in the gap technologically or provide different content under the technical limits on both sides. But then the ideal vision for a lot of people is to have a platform, open world, that is user generated content that is photorealistic with real time technology, and also with some generative AI that can be automatic tools to facilitate the user generated content. We are having some, let's say, prototypes nowadays, right? Roblox or Minecraft, etc., for tools for open worlds, for, let's say, metaverse that other adults and kids can create. But how far are we? It's quite a difficult question, of course, but maybe more concretely, what are the shortboard, let's say, the technologies that still is kind of running behind the others to have to achieve actually this ideal vision?
So the underlying tech. A couple of weeks ago, I was in London for London Fashion Week. One of the verticals that really interests me is fashion. I've spent last few years advising some fashion tech startups and some of the retailers in the UK specifically. They love this stuff because it's an expensive business. When you're creating a new collection, it can be time consuming, expensive. You're putting a lot of prototypes together and you're selling them or you're going to produce them and possibly send them around the world to your buyers. So that's very financially intense. And so they're increasingly moving to game engines. So I went to the Digital Fashion Week component of Fashion Week those 2 weeks ago was held at Epic Games Innovation Lab, which has this huge LED volume screen. And the idea that we had a mix in 1 hour, we had all the virtual catwalks where a lot of students are coming out of the colleges now designing purely digital collections and avoiding the expense of making them for real, but also this understanding that you look at the amount of money kids spend on Roblox, of course, being the real metaverse at the moment, and some absurd statistic like 67% of 12 to 16-year-olds in the US are using it on a daily basis. Their engagement figures are just out there. But they also spend more money on digital clothing than they do the real world. And so when you see things like Clo 3D as a 3D clothing designer app investing, and then Epic Games investing in them in return, they've got this quite tight-knit tool chain now where you can take these 3D clothes and put it into these virtual worlds. Epic, of course, owns and runs Fortnite, that has a budget for the creator economy where they share this $600 million pot over the next year, I think it is. So they've got an understanding of how can we enable new forms of content creation, which isn't just YouTube or TikTok videos. And so there's some amazing tech coming up for that. My specific interest with fashion as well is there going to be a route into integrating generative AI? You've probably seen some of the Pope wearing a Balenciaga puffer jacket and images like this. A lot of the images, a lot of the creatives that have taken Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and Leonardo, the other tools, to heart, have been, I would say, the big three are fashion, architecture, and filmmakers, which are getting to grips with this stuff. And so it's this weird mix. Somebody, I need to watch this now. Somebody had recreated a scene from the original Ghostbusters in the Unreal Engine as well. And Unity, the other big game engine, did something with Neil Blomkamp, who has been creating these short movie pieces. And what they have in common is these are real-time graphics, and the idea that you can puppet them potentially in real time. And there are some tools out there. I think Opus is the name of one, and I've seen demos set in some of the Oculus metaverse environments where you can have a conversation with the underlying code and it will manifest objects around you. And I think the example from maybe a year ago was Mark Zuckerberg walking onto a deserted desert island and dropping or just telling it to put some palm trees there and a picnic table and a radio playing music, stuff like that. And it's the idea that you can walk into the place. Another great one is something called Kubrick, Cuebric, which the film industry uses for these LED volumes. And this was before Midjourney, but the idea was it was another generative AI prompting device that could create a landscape. It would segment it out, it would separate it out into layers and then in paint. So you would have these parallax scrolling environments, and then you would just put them onto these giant screens behind you. So the idea of a film director going in and working with a pencil on paper concept sketch, and you would have the classic you would move from a storyboard to an animatic. Somebody famously that's done a lot of this work was James Cameron for Avatar, the early one. There was a lot of in-camera stuff, so you would get these rough views of the 3D graphics that would ultimately go on to the pipeline to turn out the finished visuals. But as fantastical as his environments were, and as much green screen as there were, this was a very quick way for the actors to see what they were building. Now, with the increase of LED volumes in virtual production for studios around the world, and interestingly enough, Amazon owns one of the biggest ones in the US now. This thing is like 80 feet across. And Netflix, I think, are building studios out in Ireland, potentially Belfast, and also big commitments from film industry in all the classic, Pinewood. So they're all building these LED stages. It brings it a step closer because you're not even having to watch the animated version after you've been captured on film with a 3D engine. You're seeing it there behind you on set. The bulk of this being digital now. And for anybody that wants to see the state of the art in this area just now, I recommend watching the Netflix series 1899, just so you get the spoilers out of the way. And then you have about an hour-long documentary of this incredible soundstage, full LED, but it's set in a boat at sea. There's water splashing about. They have a gimbal for the stage, and the foreground is built out. But it's an incredible vision of where filmmaking is going, and I think it skips that isolation that actors had felt on the green screen over the last 10, 15, 20 years since The Matrix really sort of brought this into the common filmmaking tool set. So it feels like an absolute a new golden age for filmmaking. And the other aspect for that as well, because of the technology reducing the cost of access, the idea that if you're in pre-production or you're developing an idea for a movie, that you can do your own storyboard, or to an extent you could have ChatGPT write the script for you, but I probably wouldn't advise that. The tools that were once in the domain of movie moguls and the big studios are just something you can run on your desktop now. Runway ML is probably the most famous one right now. Absolutely staggering. And so I think for the studios who are famously risk averse, you don't have to spend hundreds of millions on a visually rich and compelling movie. You can do it with desktop software. And I believe some of that was used in post-production for Everything Everywhere All at Once, which surprisingly and to my delight won the Best Picture Oscar this year. But they used some really lo-fi tech, and I think at their peak they had something like 5 people in their VFX department, which was unprecedented for a movie that looks so good and is so inventive. It just shows what you can do with raw talent and enough of the tools. I think the overall budget was 25 million, something like that, and it looks close to 100 million on screen. And then just people coming out of film school now that have their creativity squeezed out when they take a large studio movie. The idea that you can still have an auteur voice and not sacrifice the visuals. The one right now is Gareth Edwards, the creator, is getting a lot of buzz. And of course, this is humans against AI, appropriately in the middle of the Hollywood writers' strike. But I think he shot that for 80 million. And he again is extolling the benefits of working with technology that gives you a grander scope, but he likes to shoot on a small scale as well. So he'll clear a set and only have a couple of actors and the cameraman and the director and the sound in scenes. So he wants to get away from these massive 100 people on stage things, and the technology and the LED volumes and some of the tech that's coming to the post-production is allowing that to happen. So I'm expecting movies to get a lot more exciting because they're not going to be focus group to death. You can actually have an opinion on your movie, and sometimes it could be an unpopular opinion, and you can have a downbeat ending, and you're not going to get it squeezed out by the studios anymore. So I think yet another golden age is upon us.
What a fun time to be alive. So this is a phrase from a YouTube channel that is 2 minutes paper. So
Yes,
while the person is introducing the new papers, especially actually on AI, also computer graphics, computer vision, there's always this phrase. So indeed, what a great time to be alive. I guess it's still work in progress, but it's good to see the work in progress and experience it and try to use the current limits to build something that is beyond. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, but then maybe one last question. As you mentioned, the democratization of access. So people can use a lot of tools to create abundance of content, but then there's a lot of content. So maybe there is going to be a long tail effect, so everybody can find its own content, can create its own content, but also it's kind of a jungle of navigation of content. There might be repetitive content, as in, for example, today in film industry, it has been going through different techniques, different storytelling. We can see kind of repetitive stories, unless if it is a really masterpiece. So what do you think will be the future of the, let's say, curation part, but also how to maybe put in highlight the best content uh, when there are so many available contents?
Yeah, that's actually a really tough question. And you're right. I'm partway through researching and writing a piece on Amazon. Amazon just made I think, a $4 billion investment in well, Claude via Anthropic, which is one of these big generative AI things. And I think they're attempting to revolutionize the publishing industry again, but they own game divisions and filmmaking. I mean, they own MGM. People don't know this about Amazon. They're huge. And so they're investing a lot in this tech. Uh, they own 91% of the self-published book market, and a lot of that market is, I would say, fan fiction. So the most widely known one was the 50 Shades, which came out of, I think it was a fan fiction for the Twilight movies slash books. So we've never had more content available to us. And as you say, how on earth do we make sense of it? And I think it goes two ways. You have the big water cooler moments where everybody can just talk about one thing, and Stranger Things is a good example of that, or Squid Game, stuff like this on Netflix being, the dominant platform in the space. They've done a great job over the years. They ran a competition maybe 15 years ago, I think, back when they were still just posting DVDs to people, where I think a father and daughter team won this, and it was an algorithm for their recommendation engine, because they want you not to watch the credits of the movie you've just finished, but to jump you on to the next thing. And the UI certainly nudges you in that direction, but they want to get a sense of who you are, so that when something comes up, when you fire up the app and there's a bunch of icons at the top of the screen, there's something in that first view that you go, oh yeah, that's for me. And so it's a sense of the first party data. It's intuiting what you might want to watch based on prior stuff. And there are many people spending a lot of time on basically profiling us. And I think these profiles will become more individual, particularly as we move into Web3, and cookies may be going away, but first party data on Amazon being the classic example, because they own so much. They know exactly what we read, how long, where we get bored on the Kindle. If you're reading your books on there, which I am, and I'm, that's part and parcel with it. I'm not upset, because they usually recommend good books to me. So there's this idea of a curated stream of content, whether it be video, novels, or music potentially, just for you. I'm okay with that, because it introduces me to nice new things, some of which I buy. On the long tail, that becomes really interesting when the generative AI becomes good enough to write a book just for you, or you write it with your kid. You want to do a bedtime story about something you saw that day, or it can be anything, but you can get these serviceable storytelling experiences. And there's speaking to a startup in there's a company called White Mirror in the UK, which is a branch of the R&D lab from a book publisher that are exploring this space as well. And so you'll be having things built just for you. And so if you're in a specific mood when you go on holiday, you can order this book that will be written and sent digitally to your electronic device, whether it be your phone or your e-reader, or it could just be something that, if you still have paper, that's fine, because again, Amazon own these, I want to say, espresso print machines, where you can just ad hoc create one book for one person and send it out there. I think a lot of my family will be getting my Midjourney compilations in printed form just now. So the long tail could be editions of one for one person, written to order for their very specific requirements, and you'll get these as gifts and presents and all the rest of it. But part of the pact we'll have to make for that to come true. We'll have to reveal a lot about ourselves to these publishers of the future, and I think some people will like that, and some people won't. It also runs the risk of getting caught in a bubble of just things that, hey, you might like this, and what about the things you would never have dreamed of liking, but some friend said, hey, I know this isn't your thing, but you've got to listen to this. And I hope that degree of serendipity doesn't go away, but it's an exciting time. New dynasties are being built for sure. I, for one, welcome our robot overlords to come.
Yeah, personally, I already started to listen to my favorite songs in Spotify repetitively just to convince the algorithm that I really like it. Please do that more. But there's no button that I can actually click on doing that. I guess it's a work in progress. There might be different interface of tomorrow's algorithm, partially by choice, partially new content. But then personally, I think Spotify's algorithm is really powerful, always recommending a combination of existing genre of music that the person likes and the new, surprisingly good music that is not in the same category but still relevant. I guess the big data is making its magic by itself. So yeah, it's very, very great chatting with you, catching up on a lot of different topics today. There are so many more, but then yeah, I guess we will follow up on this and see what happens. And 5 years ago, we'll be saying, well, maybe another 5 years still.
Sure.
So yeah, thank you, Rupert. Do you have any words maybe for the community who is more like entrepreneurs, investors, so around, I guess they are trying to understand what's going to happen next.
Sure. Oh, that's $1 million question right there. Keep an eye out on what's out there. I like Matt Wolf on YouTube for the AI side of things. There's some really good podcasts. I think My First Million I like. It's more for startup crowd. It's quite a good one. The Economist does some amazing podcasts. They're just introducing a paid tier, but I'll probably sign up to that one because their content is top tier, and they're always they see the big trends coming. They've covered a lot of the AI stuff as well. Just keep your eyes and ears open. And I think the thing I've noticed about entrepreneurs, where they've noticed, where we just go, oh, that was frustrating. They go, okay, that's frustrating. And here's a business model that will make me $1 million a year by fixing that problem. An example the other day was that I met a friend in London who had dropped their bags off at a corner shop for £5 for the day or something, because when you travel, like many of us do, you're sometimes stuck when you're out of the hotel and you want to explore the city a bit more. Instead of the annoyance of dragging this thing up and down the lifts and escalators and the underground, they just went, yeah, we'll drop them here. And they're making an amazing business of that. So anytime there's a pain point, try and figure out if you can bring some new technology to bear and make the world a little bit better for everybody, and they're willing to pay for that when you do. So if every obstacle is an opportunity if you look at it in the right way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for the insights and looking forward to hearing more about your next creative journey as well. So thank you again, Rupert. See you
It
very
was a
soon.
pleasure. Thanks so much, and hopefully I'll see you at AWE this year as well.
For sure.